Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Greek Mythology, where in this series we cover all the Olympian gods, heroes and monsters of Greek mythology in a nice, neat little package. Now, if you haven't had the pleasure yet, be sure to go back and check out our previous episodes. Otherwise, get ready to dive right on in, because we are continuing with the main story from last time. We left off with Zeus meeting the Titan goddess Leto and their near capture by the Titans. So Zeus managed to escape, but not before impregnating Leto. Now the other Olympians would eventually take care of the Titans and defeat them, thus allowing Leto to finally give birth to her children, the divine twins Artemis and Apollo. However, she was forced to wander the earth for quite some time before finding a place to settle down and give birth. But more importantly, while Leto was wandering around, she came across an old man fishing on the edge of a nearby river. And so she asked the old man if she could have the use of his fishing rod, so that she may pull herself up onto the bank and rest. And the old man agreed to this request. However, he warned Leto that once she sat down on the stone, she would be unable to get back up again. But being desperate for just a moment of relaxation, she accepted the risk and laid down on the stone, only to be fused into it by magic. Luckily, the old man revealed himself to be Hermes, and he helped free her from the spell, and even gave her a pair of golden sandals that allowed her to travel anywhere freely. Around this time, the war between the Titans and the Olympians was coming to an end, and Zeus sent Hermes to tell Leto that the way was now clear, and that she could go ahead and give birth on the floating island of Delos. Will give birth. And when they grew up, they were so grateful to Hermes for helping their mother that they made him immortal and appointed him as the messenger of the gods. And this is how Hermes got his job. But anyway, moving on from there, about a year or two later, after the war was over, King Acrisius of Argos boasted that no descendants of his would ever rule Argos. And it just so happened that at that very same moment, his daughter, Danaë, walked past him, and he didn't see her. So, in response to this unintentional slight against his daughter, the gods cursed Acrisius with a horrible prophecy. He would die by the hands of his grandson, and to prevent such a fate, Acrisius locked his daughter Danaë away in a tower with no windows and no doors, just to make sure that she never had any contact with men and could never have any children. Now, a god could get pretty creative with loopholes sometimes. Anyway, shortly after, Zeus decided to pay Daddy a surprise visit. And being a god, he easily broke into the tower where Danaë was being kept. He then transformed himself into a golden showerhead and poured gold coins down on her from above. And soon enough, Danaë was pregnant. Of course, when Acrisius found out what had happened, he was furious. So he took both Danaë and the baby boy she was carrying, Perseus, and put them inside a wooden chest. And as a result, they floated around the ocean for quite a while. Eventually, the chest washed ashore on the eastern Mediterranean island of Zeus. And it just so happened that King Polydex of that island found the box and opened it up, thinking there might be treasure inside. He brought the two inside the palace and told Perseus to stay there, while he went to tell his queen about the discovery. But Perseus was actually really smart for a baby, and once Polydex left the room, Perseus turned into a huge winged monster and scared the crap out of the king. That was just a little special treat from Zeus himself, by the way, because he wasn't too fond of Then Perseus convinced the king that he was really the son of Zeus and begged him to let him stay on the island. In exchange, Perseus offered to do whatever Polydex asked of him. And so the king agreed to help Perseus live out the remainder of his mortal life on the island. Now, during Perseus's stay there, he fell in love with a local princess named Andromeda. However, the sea monster Cetus had been unleashed upon the island and demanded that Princess Andromeda be sacrificed to him, unless the people of Seraphos were going to be devoured. The king agreed to sacrifice his daughter, but just before Cetus could devour Andromeda, Perseus swooped in and slew the beast. This act alone made Perseus extremely popular among the humans on the island, and he was welcomed as a hero. And after he married Andromeda, they ruled the island together and lived happily ever after. Yay! Happy ending. No, wait, this isn't the ending. I'm sorry. It's still not over yet. Not long after marrying Andromeda, Perseus learned of the prophecy that his grandfather Acrisius had received about his death at the hands of his grandson. And since Perseus was also his grandson, he knew that the prophecy had to be referring to him. And as a result, he became very afraid. In fact, he became so afraid that he decided to flee and hide from his grandfather. But while he was gone, something terrible happened. During a hunting trip, Acrisius spotted a stag that had been pursued by a hound, and as a joke he took aim with his spear and threw it at the stag. But unbeknownst to Acrisius, it was actually Perseus that had taken the form of the stag, and the dog was none other than Anubis, Zeus's dog, who was sent to retrieve Perseus's soul when he died. When Acrisius realized what had happened, he tried to apologize and explain, but it was already too late. Anubis grabbed onto Perseus's soul and pulled it away, and the god of the dead, Hades, was quick to whisk the young hero away to the underworld. This was unfortunate for Persephone, who had been promised to Hades as his bride, but who had been waiting for her true love, Orion, to come rescue her from marriage. Guess the rescue was gonna have to wait a bit longer. But anyway, Zeus was furious with his brother Hades for taking Perseus away like that. So he decided to grant the young hero godlike powers. And together, they journeyed to the underworld and challenged Hades to a wrestling match. And when Zeus won, he claimed Perseus' soul and returned him back to the mortal realm, where he continued to live out the remainder of his days on the island of Sit. Some versions of the myth say that Perseus actually slew Medusa before going on to slay Cetus and rescue Andromeda. Now, if you're wondering who Medusa is and why everyone's always going on about her, let me catch you up real quick. So Medusa was originally a beautiful human woman who had been transformed into a hideous monster. You see, she had actually been raped by Poseidon, and when she sought Athena for help, the goddess was so disgusted with her that she turned her into a monster with a head full of snakes instead of hair. Then, when Perseus had been sentenced to kill Medusa as punishment for accidentally killing his grandfather, he sought out the help of Athena and Hermes, who gave him a special mirrored shield and sword. Medusa usually turned anyone who looked directly at her eyes into stone. So Perseus figured that if he couldn't beat her in battle, he could always just trick her into turning herself into stone. And that's exactly what happened. She turned to stone after looking in his shield, which was highly reflective and was shattered into pieces by his sword. Then, as an added bonus, Perseus cut off Medusa's head and used it as a weapon for the rest of his life. And Athena took the head and placed it on her shield. Also, if you want to know where those nasty Gorgons came from and how Medusa's sisters fared against Perseus, then we've got the episode for you. Check out Greek Mythology, Part 3, The Golden Age, EP 5, The Labors of Heracles. See you next time. Thanks for watching.